I'm logged into IICS. That's the application, right? So my focus today is going to be uh, on the administration aspect as well as on the metadata administration aspect primarily. So the difference between metadata command center and administrator is if you were to layer it in a bottom up fashion, the bottom is the infrastructure, and for infrastructure management you would use Informatica administrator. So this is the equivalent if you're coming from on-premise EDC, IDQ background, then it's the equivalent of the administrator application, admin console in on-premise in the domain. So where all the infrastructure is managed, the user management, all the connection management, all of those things are done. And on top of that layer is the metadata command center, which is basically helping manage the all of the metadata that you want to harvest for your enterprise, right? And metadata includes not just the catalog sources for the governance assets. If you want to do any sort of custom fields, like for out of the box assets, this is the equivalent of the Axon custom fields. This is the place to make the configurations. If you want to extend workflows or configure workflows, this is the place, right? So for anything that is somewhat administration specific and monitoring specific, so you would use the metadata command center. It's usually for a smaller group of controlled higher privileged users. And data governance and catalog application is the consumption layer, the equivalent of the EDC application, right? This metadata command center, the equivalent for the on-prem, for the folks who are familiar with on-prem, it's the equivalent of the LDM admin. All right, so let me start with the bottommost layer, administrator. Right, so if you're familiar with IICS, of course, you're already familiar with the administrator. But if you're not familiar with Informatica Cloud, then this is the place where you set up your SAML configurations. You can use the SAML configuration here just for authentication, or extension of that is if you want to bring in the users, synchronize and create IICS user objects. This will help with authorization, right? You can put them in roles, give them different stakeholdership. Then you can have all of those users seeded in the system before you open it up for the end users, right? Or before you pick them as individual users, as stakeholders within the application, within cloud data governance and catalog application. So that's the SAML part, that's the user management part. But there is also native user support that is available, user groups, users both are available, user roles are available, a bunch of out of the box roles are available. You can create your own custom roles, additional roles, depending on how you want to configure your organizations or your client's organization in terms of user management. This is the place to start with. So outside of that, runtime environment is another critical piece. All of the compute for metadata extraction, data profiling happens on the runtime environment. But the same runtime environment gets used or can be used for your cloud data integration jobs, cloud data quality jobs, or cloud data if you're using MDM, mass ingestion. So all the applications that run on the secure agent, or a collection of secure agents, runtime environment is the place to configure. Right, so connections. So this is one difference between EDC and CDGC, Cloud Data Governance and Catalog, wherein a common set of connections can be used, and this gets you the connections that you define here can be used for Cloud CDI or for CMI or for cloud data governance and catalogs. So one place to define all the connections for your organization, and it gets consumed in various different applications. So similarly, there is metering. There are a bunch of other, of course, this is all outside of individual services, but this is a critical piece that needs to be set up by the infrastructure administrator for the various services to consume. So once you kind of go up the stack, now you're at the metadata administrator, right? All of these are available they're just click away, right? They're all available in the app switcher. So in metadata command center, of course, yeah, you can create your own catalog source. That's probably the biggest use that you will find here, right? So there are multiple sources supported. There is JDBC supported as well. If you do not find the native scanner that is listed in this particular page. There are also custom catalog sources. If you do not find a source here, let me pick Sybase. We do not have a native connector, a native scanner for Sybase. If you want to extend one of the models that we have, maybe the SQL Server model, you can take that and make the required changes and bring that as a custom catalog source. So if you're familiar with EDC, it's very similar concept. You can create, you can start with a metadata model definition. And then once that is defined, you can put a layer around it, which is the custom catalog source. And those custom catalog sources appear here, and then you can configure them next. Right. So let's move on to the next topic here, which is data classification and lookup tables. Lookup tables are, as the name suggests, a table with CSV values, like a column row values, right? So you can put the values which can be used for evaluating classifications. For example, if you want to look up to see if it's a product code, the lookup table can have all the product codes. The classification expression can look up in that table and identify if the value is there, then I can mark it as mark that particular column or a field, the data element as a product code, right? Or anything that is required for the business to classify, which is purpose built, right? So let me start with one of the catalog sources that is already configured, right? So let me pick one right here. If it is, it's a SQL Server one. Yeah, let's start with that. So this is the place, as I said, the connections are reused. So the connections that you defined in the administrator, those show up here for the specific source type that you are interested in. In this case, it's Azure SQL Server. You choose the connection and you do the configuration. So this is where you'll spend majority of the time. You can perform various different activities on this particular catalog source. You can extract the metadata. You can profile. You can run column profiles. You can run classifications. You can enable, disable the various options here. You can run relationship discovery and a glossary association. Right. So each of these have its own set of parameters to deal with, very much similar to how it is done in EDC. Right. So in the concept of runtime environment is something new, because here you're just configuring, and you do have the option of using one or more of runtime environments. In EDC, it was all there, whatever you have it installed, that was the only runtime environment available. Here you have two options. One is a serverless execution, which is you do not install anything on premise, right? As you use the Informatica managed infrastructure, and this helps with cloud sources primarily, and it can do the metadata extraction. Let's say from an S3 source, you're not installing any on-premise runtime environments. You're using Informatica managed infrastructure. You provide the credentials to connect to S3. and if we reach out to that particular S3 source at the defined schedule, apply the right set of filters, and we harvest all the metadata, right? So that's one option. The other option is you can have more than one runtime environments. One set of runtime environment can be running within the data center, right, on premise probably. The other could be running in AWS or Azure VPC, right? Depending on how the data sprawl is, it's recommended to install the runtime environment closer to the data source. That way, the latency issues are resolved, and also if it's a cloud source, probably the taking the data out of the system, out of that cloud ecosystem, may incur cost that can be avoided, right? Data or metadata, right? So for if it is data profiling, yeah, then probably there is some data involved. If it is not, then it is just the metadata. So another aspect here I touched upon earlier on is the programmable objects. So this is the advanced scanner configuration. If you want advanced scanning to happen for the SQL database, then yeah, you can use, it's just a flag that you'd need to set. So data profiling also has a similar kind of options. Data classification is you create multiple classifications, or you use one of the 85 or 86 classifications that we provide out of the box. We refresh these and add new classifications every month. So after a couple of months, you may be seeing 100 plus classifications here in this list. So you can include all the classifications that you want to run against the catalog source that you're going after. Another important AI ML based feature that we have is intelligent glossary association based on the certain attributes like the column name or any data element related name, comments, parent name, and depending on that, we do an automatic association based on various algorithms with glossary, name, description, aliases that you create, right? And the association can happen automatically, and you can auto accept it. There are, if you do not want auto acceptance to happen, yeah, of course, yeah, you can disable it, but these associations at that point in time will appear as recommendations. Then you can manually accept or reject those recommendations. But if you enable auto acceptance based on a conformance score, then they are automatically associated, and you can go back and of course you can always reject it if you think that is an incorrect association. So last feature that I want to highlight here is the relationship discovery. This is another AI ML capability. This helps with schema matching, recommendations, or ability to identify currently these schema matching recommendations are made available in the cloud data integration. If your developer is building a mapping, and in that process if relationship discovery for this particular catalog source is enabled, then recommendations start showing up, right? So within cloud data governance and catalog, we still haven't built the similarity discovery, right? So this is suggesting other similar type of columns, so or data elements or data sets. Those have not been built into the product yet, but probably in the coming releases, monthly releases, you will see that popping up. That will help with identifying if you have curated a particular data element, a column or a field with a specific glossary association, classification, and maybe privacy policy association, a bunch of things. Now, if you want to propagate to all other similar type of columns or data elements, then you can push a button and it gets propagated, right? So that it helps with efficiently managing the cataloged assets with the right set of governance constructs that you have. All right, so those are the various capabilities. You can always apply filters, and we do recommend you apply filters. You start small, start with a small schema, a small database, or a small set of tables or views within a schema, so that you bring in only a smaller metadata in the initial phases of the project. Go through the motions of using the product, classifying, creating glossaries, associating them automatically. Once you kind of complete the initial iteration, then you expand. Then you come and remove the filters, or apply the filters for a broader set of data assets to be included or excluded. Right? The primary consideration here is cost. The metering is based on compute, which is all the metadata extraction that you're doing, the classification that needs to be done, the data profiling that needs to be done, glossary association needs to be done. There is cost associated with it. And there is cost associated for harvesting the volume of metadata that you are bringing in. And that can be, if you're bringing in a lot of metadata, and then you need to go back and restart the experiment because you missed something or it's done incorrectly, you want to redo it, then you're incurring the cost unnecessarily. While you're in the initial phases, you may want to start small and then expand more. So the filters will help with that. And these filters are applicable for both metadata and data. Last but not the least is you can run it on a schedule, or you can run ad hoc. So let me start with the run ad hoc here. Since I've made some changes, let me discard that. Let me pick the database, the catalog source here. Let me push the run button. So all the various capabilities that we had configured, all of them show up. There is no need. This is one difference from EDC. There is no need to run all of them in a sequence. If you're adding classifications, and if you want to just run additional classifications, you can just do that. Of course, the very first time the metadata extraction and data profiling has to be completed. But after that, if you want to iterate multiple times to include more classifications, or include just the glossaries association, you can do that without reaching out to the catalog source again. Yeah, so in EDC, you had to reach out to the catalog source again. That is one enhancement that we have done in CDGC. And also the computation, the metadata extraction and data profiling, the computation happens on the secure agent or the runtime environment running closer to the data source. Data classification, any of the discovery jobs, data classification, relationship discovery, glossary association, all of these run within Informatica managed infrastructure, right? So it gives the flexibility to run them iteratively based on the metadata and the data profiling statistics you have already harvested. You don't need access to the data source again. Right, so that's one part. So now the second is here, you can set the permissions here. If you want a specific user, you may have 10 administrators. You probably want to identify only one or maybe two users to specifically work on to have the access for that particular catalog source configuration. Not the catalog source I'm referring to. I'm referring to the catalog source configuration. Maybe I just want Chris Phillips and Eric to be the only administrators on this catalog source configuration. You can specify that here. Or if you want everyone in that role, in that group, or in the primarily belonging to the role, this governance administrator role, right? Then they can be all of the users belonging to that role can participate with the privileges that are granted at the administrator level. Yeah, so you have that flexibility. So there is also purge, delete, all other capabilities exist here. So that's on the catalog source side. So data classifications, as I said earlier, there are a bunch of classifications that are available every month. If you come and click the import button after we have done our deployments, you'll see some additional classifications getting imported. Similarly, lookup tables can also be imported. So creation of classifications, it's a fairly simple exercise. Probably for the folks who are familiar with EDC, this may sound like a an enhancement that we have done. Let's say it is a US state. If you want to classify a column or a data element as a US state, then there is a simple expression editor here, right? So if the name contains, let's say, state, simplistically, and if you want um, additional rule expansion, right? So if the value frequently appears in a lookup table, and if the where is it? You need to specify the lookup table. So let me search for one of the lookup tables with US states. Lookup table and state is the column name, and I am looking up this particular column, the frequent values within that column, and matching against a lookup table. If that conformance is 95%, I'm good to classify this that particular column as a US state. Yeah. So for a non-technical user, a simple editor is available. They can iterate on this multiple times, and they can run one at a time and see if it is satisfying the requirement. Or curating. This helps with the fine tuning the curation. So now, if you want to complicate this, right, and the complication may be required for specific expansions that you want to do, right? So this is Spark SQL expression. That's how it has been designed. So we do provide a whole bunch of metadata. I don't think EDC had all of these capabilities. So some of these additional statistics that are available, those can be used. You can also use some of the operators that are available, built-in functions that are available. Of course, we looked at lookup tables. You can create constants so that the rule that you're creating is easily readable. If there are lots of places where you are doing, let's say, this frequent value lookup, and if you want to give that a constant name and then use that constant multiple times, you will be able to do that, right? You can validate and then you can put it to test. So there's a powerful expression editor that has been provided, a simpler one as well as an advanced one. So outside of that, the metadata management part, you can also monitor all the jobs that are currently running or that you own. And you can also, within the specific job that gets executed, right? So you can figure out the job statistics. Like in this case, I did the metadata extraction. How many objects got extracted? You can notice that. You can also notice that at every job type that you have done glossary associations, there were 186 glossaries that were associated out of the 276, right? If there are any failures, you should be able to track that in the logs. Soon we will have the ability to click from here, and so that you can go see an object level view of what happened to a particular table or an object that is going through the processing, right? You can download and send it to Informatica, or you can do an offline analysis as well. Right, so that's on the monitoring side. And if you are familiar with EDC, it's a very similar connection assignment concept exists here. For any third-party system which has not been cataloged yet, those appear as unresolved connection endpoints, which can be resolved here in the monitor page. So taking a step back, so this is not, as I said earlier, this is not just for metadata, for all other configurations and the application behavior. CDGC application behavior can be defined here. So first thing is the workflows. If you want to configure workflows, we are providing 3 out of the box workflows which can be configured for various different types of activities. You can visualize the workflow that we are providing out of the box. You can go through the configurations here. Meaning which type of role needs to be performing the various approval process, basically taking on the different different responsibilities in the workflow can be configured, and that can be configured for various types of assets as well. right? So in this case, metric and business term both are configured. You can add additional types as well. Right, so there are out of the box workflows that can be configured for various different asset types. So maybe majority of the simpler use cases get covered. We do not have a custom workflow capability built into the product yet. That's on our roadmap to be built. Once we have that, then any sort of complex workflows that you want to build, you'll be able to do that and perform the configuration right here. Customizations, we briefly touched upon this. You can bring in different metadata models. You can, like for example, if you want to pick up, let's say in this case, BI, right? So there is a BI model that we have provided. If you want to make modifications to that and upload it as a custom model, you can do that. And you can build that into a custom catalog source type. Right, that's an extension. And the third extension is for the existing models, you can add additional custom fields. So those are the various configurations that can be performed. And currently, CD Cloud Data Governance and Catalog happens to be the first application that is taking advantage of this. There are some configurations that will come for the Cloud Data Marketplace as well in the coming releases. We're also working on Cloud Data Prep. So very much similar to on-premise enterprise data preparation product, EDP product. You will be able to preview the data in the Cloud Data Governance and Catalog. You'll be able to get into the preparation mode in the Cloud Data Governance and Catalog, and the configuration of that will start appearing in Metadata Command Center. It's not limited to just the applications that Informatica is providing. You can build your own custom applications. When we expose the public APIs in the coming releases, you can use Metadata Command Center to set up and configure and have a custom application built. You may be using Informatica provided applications, or you may be just using the APIs and building your own custom applications. That's the role of the Metadata Command Center to kind of set up your cloud metadata platform. From then on, you can use it with the applications that Informatica has provided, or you build your own, right? So this is the middle tier. Administrator application is the bottommost tier, which provides all the infrastructure, and the top tier is the applications that sit on top of Metadata Command Center. One of them is the data governance and catalog application that we looked at early on.